was about 11 or 12 at the time, a very critical age in the masculine journey, the age when the question really begins to surface. At the very moment when I am desperately wondering what it means to be a man, and do I have what it takes, my father checked out, went silent. He had a workshop out back, attached to the garage, and he would spend his hours out there alone, reading, doing crossword puzzles, and drinking. That is a major wound. As Bly says, not receiving any blessing from your father is an injury. Not seeing your father when you are small, never being with him, having a remote father, an absent father, a workaholic father, is an injury. My friend Alex's father died when he was 4 years old. The sun in his universe set, never to rise again. How is a little boy to understand that? Every afternoon Alex would stand by the front window, waiting for his father to come home. This went on for almost a year. I've had many clients whose fathers simply left and never came back. Stewart's dad did that. Just up and left, and his mother, a troubled woman, was unable to raise him. So he was sent to his aunt and uncle. Divorce or abandonment is a wound that lingers because the boy or girl believes if they had done things better, daddy would have stayed. Some fathers give a wound merely by their silence. They are present yet absent to their sons. The silence is deafening. I remember as a boy wanting my father to die and feeling immense guilt for such a desire. I understand now that I wanted someone to validate the wound. My father was gone, but he was physically still around. Because he was not gone. So I lived with a wound no one could see or understand. In the case of silent, passive, or absent fathers, the question goes unanswered. Do I have what it takes? Am I a man, Daddy? Their silence is the answer. I don't know. I doubt it. You'll have to find out for yourself. Probably not. The wound's effect. Every man carries a wound. I have never met a man without one. No matter how good your life may have seemed to you, you lived in a broken world full of broken people. Your mother and father, no matter how wonderful, couldn't have been perfect. She is a daughter of Eve, and he a son of Adam. So there is no crossing through this country without taking a wound. And every wound, whether it's assaultive or passive, delivers with it a message. The message feels final and true, absolutely true, because it is delivered with such force. Our reaction to it shapes our personality in very significant ways. From that flows the false self. Most of the men you meet are living out a false self, a posé, which is directly related to his wound. Let me try to make this clear. The message delivered with my wound, my father despairing into his own battles, was simply this. You are on your own, John. There is no one in your corner, no one to show you the way, and above all, no one to tell you if you are or are not a man. The core question of your soul has no answer, and can never get one. What does a boy do with that? First, I became an unruly teen. I got kicked out of school, had a police record. We often misunderstand that behavior as adolescent rebellion, but those are cries for involvement, for engagement. Even after God's dramatic rescue of me at the age of 19, when I became a Christian, the wound remained. As my dear friend Brent said, becoming a Christian doesn't necessarily fix things. My errors were still lodged deep and refused to allow some angry wounds inside to heal. I mentioned earlier that for years I was a very driven man, a perfectionist, a hard charger, and a fiercely independent man. The world rewards that kind of drivenness. Most of the successful men reading this book are driven. But behind me was a string of casualties, people I had hurt, or dismissed, including my own father. There was the near casualty of my marriage, and there was certainly the casualty of my own heart. For to live a driven life, you have to literally shove your heart down, or drive it with whips. You can never admit need, never admit brokenness. This is the story of the creation of that false self. And if you had asked my wife during the first 10 years of our marriage if we had a good relationship, she probably would have said yes. But if you had asked her if something was missing, if she sensed the fatal flaw, she would have immediately been able to tell you, "He doesn't need me." That was my vow, you see. I won't need anyone. After all, the wound was deep and unhealed, and the message it brought seemed so final. I am on my own. Another friend, Stan, is a successful attorney and a genuinely good guy. When he was about 15, his father committed suicide, stuck a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. His family tried to put it all behind them, sweep it under the rug. They never spoke of it again. The message delivered by that gruesome blow was something like this. Your background is very dark. The masculine in your family cannot even be spoken of. Anything wild is violent and evil. The effect was another sort of vow. I will never do anything even remotely dangerous, or risky, or wild. I will never be like my dad. How many men live with that vow? I won't take one step in that direction. I will be the nicest guy you ever met. You know what? He is. Stan's the nicest guy you could meet. Gentle, creative, caring, soft-spoken. And now he hates that about himself. He hates the thought that he's a pushover, that he won't take you on, can't say no, can't stand up for himself. Those are the two basic options. Men either overcompensate for their wound and become driven, violent men, or they shrink back and go passive, retreating men. Often it's an odd mixture of both. Witness the twin messages sported by young college-age men, especially a goatee, which says, I'm kind of dangerous, and a baseball hat turned backward, which says, but really I'm a little boy, don't require anything of me. Which is it? Are you strong, or are you weak? Remember Alex, who stood at the door waiting for Daddy who would never return? You wouldn't in a million years have guessed that was his story if you had known him in college. He was a man's man, an incredible football player, a hard-drinking, hard-living man every guy looked up to. He drove a truck, chewed tobacco, loved the outdoors. He used to eat glass. I'm serious. It was sort of frat party trick he took on, the ultimate display of dangerous strength. He'd literally take a bite out of a glass, chew it slowly, and swallow it. When he worked as a bouncer for a tough bar, it made a pretty impressive show to get the roughnecks in line. But it was a show, the whole Macho Man persona. Charles, the artistic boy, the piano player whose father called him a faggot, what do you think happened there? He never played the piano again after that day. Years later, as a man in his late 20s, he does not know what to do with his life. He has no passion, cannot find a career to love, and so he cannot commit to the woman he loves, cannot marry her because he is so uncertain of himself. But of course, his heart was taken out, way back there in this story. Dave is also in his 20s now, drifting, deeply insecure, and loaded with a great deal of self-hatred. He does not feel like a man, and he believes he never will. Like so many, he struggles with confidence around women and around men he sees as real men. Stuart, whose father abandoned him, became a man without emotion. His favorite character as a boy was Spock, the alien in Star Trek who lived solely from his mind. Stuart is now a scientist, and his wife is immensely lonely. On it goes. The wound comes, and with it a message. From that place the boy makes a vow, chooses a way of life that gives rise to the false self. At the core of it all is a deep uncertainty. The man doesn't live from a center. So many men feel stuck, either paralyzed and unable to move, or unable to stop moving. Of course, every little girl has her own story too, but I want to save that for a later chapter and bring it together with how a man fights for a woman's heart. Let me say a few more words about what happens to a man after the wound is given.